All right. While we're waiting for people, um, if you want to chime in, unmute yourself. Just let me know where you're coming from. Uh, if you're here in the US, I know that we are all dealing with major cold snap right now. So I hope you are staying warm. Just gonna let people in here. All right. Hi, Lynn. You get picked on because you have your camera. I can see you. And gives
Can
people.
You see me now?
I can see you now and hear you. How are you doing today?
Good. Yeah. And you?
Yeah, pretty good. Trying to stay warm.
Yeah. Are you on the West Coast?
I am on the west coast of the United States. It sounds like you are maybe not in the United States, but we are all throughout the country in the midst of a major cold snap right now.
I am I'm in Ohio.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, even though I sound like I'm from somewhere else.
Originally, yeah. But,
What part of the West Coast? Whereabouts?
Portland, Oregon. Um,
Oh yeah.
so
Nice.
where we were told we were supposed to have a relatively warm, wet winter. So a lot of rain this winter, but it has started out with a lot of snow and ice. We were misled. I don't know. Supposed to be an El Nino year. So I don't know. But the roads, fortunately or unfortunately, have made it possible for me not to have to deal with parents and cold weather. Because it's not really the children, it's whether the parents are ready to have their children out in the cold weather. So it is 3. I do want to honor people's time, but I do know that we had more people signed up. So I guess what I'll do before I start is just some quick housekeeping. I'm very dark. I don't know if I can fix that or not. But some quick housekeeping. One is that I am recording this session. Just so you're aware of that. Secondly, no precipitation right now, so I am not expecting to just be disconnected. It may happen. So just in that case, if we get disconnected due to the instability of my internet, I'd say give it 5 or 10 minutes, see if I can reconnect us. If not, we go to plan B, which is accessing the recording from Sunday or, inviting you to join us tomorrow. You may want access to some controls. So if you look at the bottom of your Google Meet screen, there is a red phone icon. Next to the red phone, there are 3 vertical dots. Those vertical dots are your friends. If you want to change your view, so in other words, if you have, everybody in your view and you want to make my slideshow presentation bigger, you can change it to spotlight view. Also, those 3 vertical dots give you the option of turning on closed captioning on your particular device, if that would be helpful to you. We do have a small group, so I am going to ask you to stay muted if you're not speaking. It's just going to, eliminate background noise. But because we have a small group, it sometimes is difficult for me to monitor chat and do the slideshow and speaking. So, if I'm not seeing something you put into chat and you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself and just shout it out. We can be fairly informal with a small group. All right, like I said, I want to honor your time. So I am going to go ahead and get started. So just give me a moment here to get my slideshow up and running here for you. All right. So today we are going to talk about nature-based fine motor development, provocations that you can do, a framework you can use for helping children develop fine motor skills, whether you're indoors or out. Now, I always like to emphasize for the children that I teach, for adults, the human connection to our land and to nature. And so with that in mind, before I start, I just want to acknowledge that I am coming to you today from the traditional unceded lands of the Chinookan, Kalapuyan, Clascani, and Athabascan people. I know we're in a virtual space, and so we're all coming from different land. So I encourage you now to do your own reflection. If you know the native lands that the native indigenous population of the land that you're on, feel free to do your own private reflection. You can put it in the chat if you want, or leave it out of the chat, whatever moves you. If you do not know about the indigenous population with claims to the land that you're on, there are several interactive maps where you can start doing that research. And I just have a link to one particular website that will allow you to type in your location and get started learning about the indigenous populations in your area. All right. So let's go ahead and I am going to just kind of overview what we're doing today. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my background and how I got into nature-based teaching. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what exactly we mean, or at least what I mean, when I talk about fine motor skills and what kind of skills we're trying to develop for children. I'm going to give you a framework to use for coming up with your own ideas and then walk you through that framework using one natural material, which is feathers. Just so you have an example of how to go through the framework. Hopefully we'll have some time. Hopefully you brought your own natural items, a little bit of loose parts with you, and we'll have some time to have some hands-on practice and chat with each other while we're practicing with that framework. And then I'm going to introduce you to a Bringing Nature Inside course that I will be starting at the end of the month. This particular workshop is meant to kind of give you a flavor of how that Bringing Nature Inside course is going to work. Fine motor skills won't be in that course, but this is a good introduction to the structure of the course. And then we'll have some time for questions, and that can be questions about fine motor or about the course, or, you know, anything generally nature-based if you want to throw me a curveball. All right, so a little bit about me. My name is Nicole Dravilis-Fravel, and I have been in the early childhood profession for 30 years now. I started out as a public school teacher, teaching in kindergarten and first grade classrooms. When one of the schools where I was teaching received a grant to open an Even Start program within the public elementary school, I moved to teaching preschool. If you're not familiar with Even Start, it is very similar to Head Start in that it is free public preschool for low-income families. The difference really between Head Start and Even Start is that Head Start is mainly a preschool program, but Even Start is for children and families starting from birth and following through to age 8. When my own child was born, my first child was born, I switched to becoming a museum educator in a children's museum. And basically, I did arts programming and arts outreach for the museum, going into programs like Head Start and doing museum art education programs with the outside entities. About 14 years ago, I founded Wildwood Nature School. Now, Wildwood Nature School was never originally conceived to be an exclusively outdoor forest program. What I knew was that I wanted to start a program for my own younger child that was child-centered, play-based, hands-on, inquiry-based. And beyond that, I had no ideas of being outside, but I kind of lucked into a location. And my first location was a converted barn that sat at the trailhead of the Wildwood Trail. A Wildwood Trail is a 31-mile trail that snakes through about 364 acres of temperate rainforest. We're sitting right on the outskirts of Portland. If you've seen the movie Leave No Trace, or if you've seen the movie Pig with Nicolas Cage, both of those movies were filmed in, set in right off of the Wildwood Trail in Forest Park, where our school is located. And I was savvy enough to know that if I lucked into this location, I needed to use it, that this was something special that that I could use to really give the children a hands-on experience with nature. And then even when I started, we were not exclusively outdoor. We started with about half of our time inside. We'd start the day inside, and then in the second half outside. Only moved to exclusively outside when everything shut down for COVID. And that was our COVID precaution, to have more ventilation, more space for people to separate from each other. And it was such a positive experience for the children, for the teachers, for the families, that we've not gone back. We are now a completely outdoors for a school program, and we plan to continue that into the future. And the reason I share all of this about me is that I want everybody to understand this is not an all or nothing proposition. I started small. I started by accident. I started by small. I started implementing things a little bit at a time as I got comfortable with it, as the children got comfortable with it. So allow yourself that grace. If you are not fully outdoors yet, give yourself and children time to experiment with things, do a little bit at a time, and just start introducing nature to the children. Okay, so I've shared a lot about me. And now I want to know about you, kind of what brought you to this session. What setting are you currently in? How much nature-based teaching do you currently do? What are the ages of the children you teach? What are some challenges? You don't have to answer all of the questions. Just give me a flavor, basically, of why you're here today, so that hopefully, if I can tailor the presentation a little bit to, what you're needing to hear. So you can either type that right into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and, tell us whatever you're comfortable with.
I don't mind starting. I am about to start a program, a nature-based program in Columbus, Ohio, for our huge New American population. And ages 3 to 5. And I think some of the challenges are going to be some of these groups of people don't really want to be outside in the winter.
The children or the parents?
Right.
Okay. Oh, that is a
I'm
challenge.
doing a pilot program just to do a needs assessment in these next couple of months and talk to families and to share about being more, the value of being outdoors, more nature-based, and try and do some parent just connecting with them and seeing what they're willing to do. And
Yeah, buy-in is definitely important with this type of program. It sounds like you're approaching it the right way, doing some surveys and talking to people. All right, from Susie, let me read what you have. Oh, great, great. So you already have a location, just, wanting to use more of it. That's perfect. Okay, well, those of you oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, we understand kids. Hopefully we do, and that's why we're here. Those of you, if you feel like chiming in later, okay. 4-year-old children 3 times a week. Yeah, a lot of programs do that. A lot of programs do like 1 day a week is, outside day. And that's just another model that works really well. And then it's something for the children to look forward to. All right. So let me head back here to where it's easier. So before we dive into what to do about fine motor, I want to make sure that we completely understand what we're talking about with fine motor skill, because I think a lot of times, preschool teachers, we think, okay, yes, fine motor skill has to do with the pincer grasp and writing and those self-help skills of zipping a coat, buttoning, snapping. And that's definitely a part of it. But there's a whole lot more that goes into fine motor skill. I do want to say at the outset that, fine motor skill does include any small muscles. So you can talk about movement of your mouth while you're talking. You can talk about eye tracking skills. We're really not going to talk about that today. We are going to focus just on the hands. I just wanted to acknowledge up front that we know that fine motor skill involves more than the hands. And it definitely does involve the pincer grasp, right? Where you're touching the thumb to the finger. It definitely does involve writing, buttoning, zipping. But in addition to it, we also want to talk about wrist stability. So if you think about holding a tennis racket or holding a hammer, you want to be able to swing that racket, swing that hammer without your wrist flapping all around. And children might need wrist stability if they're doing some sort of pounding with a mallet, if they are wiping a surface, if they're turning a key in a lock. And sometimes the best way to work on wrist stability is to work on a different type of surface. So if a child is holding their hand against a table, that is great for assisting your wrist stability. If you want to increase those muscles, improve those muscles, then you're going to want to work, say, on a vertical surface where you don't have anything holding your arm for you. There's also hand-eye coordination involved. And that would be when you are, matching the movements of your hand to what your eye is seeing. So can you thread a needle? If you're drawing on the paper, how are you tracking where the pencil's going? Those lacing cards. Hand strength. is part of fine motor skills. So when you are squeezing a material, and some things I talk about too are also appropriate amount of strength. So if you are squeezing clay versus Play-Doh, you're going to need a different amount of strength. Or let's say if you have like a plastic toy and you squeeze it as hard as you can, probably the toy is going to break, depending on the strength of the plastic. So can children moderate the amount of pressure they're putting on something when they're squeezing? Grasp and release. So if you think about like your shape sorters or stacking something in a tower, anything you're building with a block, you need to be able to hold it, right? Let go of it when it's lined up. And that's also going to lead into bilateral coordination, which is anytime you're using two hands at the same time. A lot of times what that happens for young children is needing to hold a paper in one hand while you are cutting with the other, or or tying your shoes, or we talk a lot about in preschool about crossing the midline, right? Where you are bringing a pencil from one side of the paper to the other side of the paper. So kind of the points that I wanted to get at is I hope you've realized by now that just like anything else that we do in early childhood, these are not discrete skills. You're probably not going to be able to have a child work on pincer grasp without working on wrist stability. Pretty much every part of this is used when children are writing. They need to be able to hold the pencil with the pincer grasp. They need to be able to hold their wrists steady. They need to be moving from left to right, crossing the midline. They have to have hand-eye coordination to have what's in their head match what their hand is doing on the paper. There's something that I always talk about with appropriate amount of strength. If children work with markers, they don't need to worry about appropriate amount of strength, which is why I like using markers, but I also like using crayons and pencils, because you have to have the right amount of pressure. Too light and we can't see anything. Too heavy and you can't move your hand or the paper rips. So there may be times where you can highlight one fine motor skill over the other, but they are not discrete. Your children are going to be practicing more than one at the same time. I hope that you've also deduced that these are not just about writing and self-help skills. These are foundational skills that are going to affect everything else a child is doing. So let's take math, for example. If a child wants to do counting by one-to-one matching, they'll probably need to know how to line up those small objects. And then they'll need to be moving from left to right, bilateral coordination, tracking their finger and matching their finger to what they're counting. Same thing is true for reading. Reading involves hand-eye coordination. Reading involves bilateral coordination. So these are foundational skills that affect academic progress in a whole bunch of areas. The last thing I want to emphasize is that we want to take a strengths versus deficit model to fine motor, in that there may be a point where children have a skill that we can use to help a skill that they don't have. So for example, in the fall this year, when we had our parent-teacher conferences, one mom seemed really surprised to hear me say that her son was having trouble with fine motor skills. And I think what she was doing was confusing gross motor skill with fine motor skill. And that this child is very active, but child, really couldn't figure out how to pick up a pencil, couldn't figure out how to pick up the scissors, got his hands all twisted and backwards. Let's say opening, if parents packed in the lunch one of those like fruit gummies and he had to open a packet, again, very difficult for him to figure out how to pinch his fingers to pinch the pieces of the packet apart. But because he had great gross motor skill, what he was good at was bilateral coordination. And so what mom and I talked about was using bilateral coordination to help with the pincer grasp. So we just said, start with the pincer grasp, start with those fingers kind of pinched together. Use the non-dominant hand to pick up the pencil, because then it doesn't matter how you're picking up the pencil, and then guide the pencil into the pincer grasp. And there you go. And we do the same thing with scissors. And really, it took about a week, and that was it. And now the child can directly pick up the scissors with their dominant hand. So I want to pause for a little bit. You had in the email that I sent out, you have a framework that will help you think through how to set up some fine motor opportunities. I heard that word used, and I love that word opportunities, because I think it highlights the difference between activity planning versus child-led teaching. In activity planning, you're doing something that you've thought of as a teacher because it looked cute on Pinterest, or these are the materials you have available, or this seems like a really cool activity. In child-led learning, you want to take a step back and observe the children's needs and or their interests. So what do the children need to work on, right? So we're going to start with that, and that's your left-hand column of the framework. Do they need to practice with wrist stability? Is that what's the major piece that when they add it into their great pincer grasp, they're going to have good fine motor skill overall? Or maybe they're interested in something. Maybe, so one of the things that my kids did a couple of years ago is they built booby traps. And part of building booby traps was building pulleys and strings that would hold things that would fall down on their imaginary intruders. And so that is a good way in. If you observe a children doing that, or if you observe a child asking, hey, can you help me tie this rope to this bucket? Then you know there's an interest there. There's an interest to tying things. But you're setting up an opportunity. So you've planned it based on one child's interest, based on multiple children's interests, probably not on everybody's interests and everybody's needs. So you're going to try to guide them by what you include in your opportunity, by the materials that you include, the other tools that you include with it. But you are going to be flexible as to how the children themselves interact with the materials you set up. So you've created the opportunity. The child is creating their interaction with it. And that could be because they've got a creative idea. It could be because they already, they're a child that didn't have that interest or skill, and so they're going to go with those materials in a different direction. So we want you to be open and allow for the children to go at those materials in different ways. Okay, I am going to stop sharing and come back to our meeting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that framework using a material that I happen to have access to, which is feathers. We have chickens here at Wildwood Nature School. And in the spring, the children love to collect all the feathers while the chickens are molting. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that framework kind of skill by skill and say, here's what we could do, example for pincer grasp. You're probably not going to use the framework that way. You're going to start with, what do the children in my area need to learn? And then you're probably just going to complete one row where you're thinking about, here's what the children have an interest in or need to learn. Here are the materials that they either have an interest in or that I have access to. And here's what I'm going to set up as a provocation. So hopefully this will give you some ideas for when you work with your own material for how to, just possibilities for how you could use those materials. So let's talk first about a pincer grasp. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tilt my screen a little bit just so you can see my tray here. So to work on a pincer grasp, one idea that I might use with the feathers that I have is I might just kind of have the feathers out on a tray or some sort of surface and have some clothespins. Children can pretend that the clothespins are beaks and they can collect the feathers in containers. They could even take it back out of the container and put it back on the tray, practicing their pincer grasp while they're doing it. One of my favorite ways to practice pincer grasp is to recognize that anything you're holding, a paintbrush, any type of tool, is going to require that same pincer grasp as holding a pencil. And the smaller your object, the thinner your object, the less easy it is to do a club grip and have control. It really, shorter pencils, thinner objects are almost going to force children into not using that club grip. So I just have some paint, and they can use any part of the feather to paint with the feather. They can turn it around, they can blot it, right? And that gives more of a feathery impression. Now, if you want to take that same painting activity and turn it into a wrist stabilization activity, what we do sometimes is we hang things from tree branches, and then that gives you a vertical surface to paint on. You can also do it above their heads. So you're going to want to change the surface of drawing. You can do that where you are putting cushions or pillows on the ground and children are lying prone on their stomachs. And then also painting, you can do it where you have taped paper to the underside of a picnic table, whatever you have outside or indoors, and the children are lying on their backs to paint. If you aren't outside, you probably want to cover the floor under the table if you're doing that, just to cover drips. Also, another wrist stabilization activity that a child actually discovered one year when we were still kind of partially indoors, partially outdoors, is child discovered that leaves stick to a flannel board. And so over the years, I have experimented with different natural objects that might stick to a flannel board. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, with feathers, some stick, some don't. But you can always set up feathers by your flannel board, and the children can use the feathers to make designs, make shapes while practicing their wrist stabilization. If it doesn't stick to the flannel board, you can also put contact paper sticky side up on your easel, and the children can stick the feathers and again make designs, shapes, whatever onto the easel. Your easel is a nice vertical surface for practicing wrist stability. All right, so let's kind of move on to eye-hand coordination. So don't be afraid to mix in other materials that you have in the classroom with your natural material. So here I have those plastic pony beads. And so you can use your feathers as the base for your threading. Instead of string, instead of pipe cleaners, just thread the beads directly onto the feathers. You can also take colander, right? And the children can stick the feathers into the holes in your colander. Other things you might have access to, and I love making three-dimensional art. So thinking about sculptures versus like a 2D painting or drawing. This is floral foam, and the feathers will stick into the floral foam, and children can make, whatever they want out of it. Maybe put some arms or some ears or an abstract piece of art. If you don't have access to floral foam, my dollar store always has pool noodles, and you can cut the pool noodles into smaller sections and it will serve the same purpose as the floral foam. All right, so hand strength. For me, like the biggest hand strength activity that children do always in my preschool is squeezing the glue. I am always surprised year after year, no matter how many years that I've done this, by the number of children who have trouble squeezing the glue. So in that case, I would just put out the feathers with some nice construction paper, a lot of glue, and let the children practice squeezing the glue. And then have the feathers as a collage item. You can also, I do this with feathers, I do this with leaves. Include your natural item with scissors, and this will make a nice bunch of little feathery confetti onto the paper. Now, again, there's an advantage to being outside when you do this particular activity because you're going to get a lot of little pieces of feather that float. If you are indoors, I recommend having trays underneath where the children are cutting so that everything collects in the tray, and all you have to do at the end is dump trays into your compost or trash or whatever you are using to dispose of their nice little feathery pieces. All right, so let's talk about grasp and release. So one of the things that I might do for grasp and release is just have my feathers, and children love to fill things. So I have different containers that open in different ways, right? They can practice unscrewing caps and filling the containers with the feathers, dumping the containers at the ends. Maybe you have a container where the cap lifts off. If you want to make it more exciting for the children, you might want to include some ribbon. They can tie up their containers and give little pretend gifts to their classmates if they are moved to do that. Another grasp and release, that is also pincer grasp, right? Where you are, like I said, not always discrete skills. And this is also bilateral coordination if they're holding the tube. So if the children hold the tube over a bucket, over a tray, and then their idea is either with their hands or with tongs to pick up the feathers, drop them into the tube, and let them fall down into whatever container is below them. Ooh, my feather is floating away. There we go. Okay. I got stuck there. Another way that you might want to practice bilateral coordination, like I said, anytime children are holding something in one hand while they are using a tool in the other hand, they are practicing bilateral coordination. So these are pieces of burlap, and burlap is nice because it has holes. And so they're just going to poke the feathers in the hole of one piece of burlap. A feather that's not already bent. Okay. So you're going to poke it into the hole, thread it through, and use it to attach the burlap pieces to each other. They can keep going back around. They can add another feather. If you don't have burlap, another object with holes that works really well. This is my citrus bag that my oranges came in, and I just cut it into little pieces to reuse and recycle it. And same thing, you just put the feathers through the holes And again, this is practicing hand-eye coordination as well as bilateral coordination. All right. So I've kind of gone through that framework with a material that I have access to. And so now I want to give you a little bit of time to whatever object you brought with you to go through the framework and give yourself some ideas so that when you go back to your children tomorrow or whenever the next time you see them, you have some ideas in your mind once you see a need or an interest that you can pull out. Feel free, again, we're a small group, so feel free to unmute yourselves, type into the chat, talk to us about a great idea that you have. Here's what I'm doing with my materials. Tell us about your materials, or ask for advice if you're stuck on one of the pieces of the framework. But I'm going to stop talking just for 5 to 10 minutes here, depending on how much time you think you need. But like I said, feel free to chime in with what you need. Tell us what you're working on, what your materials are. And if you want ideas from the rest of the group, ask for it. I guess I'd be interested in knowing if you want to take a break from what you're doing and type into the chat, or let me know just what materials you're working with today. Yeah, shells are good and apparently easy to come by. I think 2 people had shells on the Sunday group. Yes, Susie, leaves are fantastic because they can be exactly what you said. They can do so much in terms of, really using them in place of paper for pretty much anything you would use paper for. And then you have the added benefit, and shells do that too, where you have the added benefit where if you're doing a fine motor activity, children might start sorting them. They might start patterning with them. And so you have a way into not just motor skills, but again, that idea of nothing's discrete in early childhood. Nothing is discrete. My kids love Leaf Man too. I don't know what it is about that particular book, the simplicity of it. It's one of those books where I could, I think, read it every day and they would never get bored of it. We like making our own leaf men too, whether you're making it, sometimes kids will just do it in the forest, which is ephemeral, right? And let the leaf men blow away, or, making it on a little popsicle stick to make a leaf man puppet. And almost any art that you do is going to overlap with fine motor skill. It's very difficult to do any type of art without practicing fine motor skills.
Love some ideas about shells. I'm kind of stuck because I'm thinking can't really use scissors and yeah. So painting and stamping, that's easy. Really a little stuck.
Yeah, so somebody had yesterday for wrist stabilization, they suggested just letting children draw on another child's back with the shells so that you're just pressing lightly and uh, they're they're feeling that impression. And I mean, they could turn it into a guessing game or it could just be tickling. um, so that could be wrist stability. I think for hand-eye coordination, you might want some sort of like, I use ice trays a lot, ice cube trays. And so you're putting the shells into something that's smaller with a hole. I also have like pieces of cardboard that that have a design on it. I don't know how to explain it very well, but just pretty much any type of artwork or design, trying to think if I could find it really quickly, where the children are placing the object. Give me 1 second. Where the children are placing the object onto the design. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, if you can see it, or you can have something that's like, you know, an insect on a paper or something, and then they're just using this as their guide where they are trying, they can make whatever design they want, but this kind of guides them to put the shells in a particular hole or particular space. And so you can pretty much, like, if there's like a very simple cartoonish drawing of an insect or an animal where they would be tracing along the outsides, or I've done before where I've just taken a butcher paper, covered a table with it, and drawn different kinds of lines, different kinds of shapes. And again, the children are taking shells, pebbles, whatever small object they have to cover the designs or to work within the shapes and create another design. And so they are needing to coordinate where they're putting something based on their small objects, based on what's already drawn. Let's see. Ooh, does anybody have ideas for hand strength? I would probably pair my shells with Play-Doh or clay. Yeah, I will get to that in a second, Susie. That's a good one. And so where the children can put the shells into the Play-Doh or the clay. Now, we have a particular rule at my preschool, which helps with fine motor, which is anything that you put into the Play-Doh, Play-Doh is a shared resource. So anything you put into the Play-Doh, you take out before you move on to something else. And that taking it out and separating it from the Play-Doh is also going to help them with the pincer grasp, with hand strength. Yep, Susie said, you know, you could use tongs, or if tongs aren't strong enough, to pick up the shells, spoons, scoops, anything that you're then transferring it to another container. I think bilateral coordination, you could do very similar. The same tube that we had, as long as you have a soft landing place for the shell so that it doesn't break apart when it lands. Does that I think that kind of take you through getting some good ideas. So, you know, I think as you have more time with this, you know, you didn't have a lot of time, right? It's, you know, once you get the hang of it, you start thinking, oh yeah, I can pretty much use any material and play around with it for fine motor. skill. So I am going to go back to sharing. You will have a time for questions, so don't worry if you weren't done. But I do want to have some time to talk to you about our Bringing Nature Inside course. And that's a little bit of a misnomer called Bringing Nature Inside, because as you saw today, anything that we did today, you can do inside or outside. And so if you are already teaching outside, this is going to work for you. I just wanted to emphasize for those people that aren't there yet, that we can bring nature inside, we can do it outside. So anything that we're talking about in the course can be done inside or out. Like I said, we're not going to repeat fine motor, but the structure is going to be the same. In other words, when the course opens, you'll have access to 5 self-paced modules. And those are kind of like the beginning of what we did here, where there's a slideshow and me talking and kind of a little bit of the background of, of how we teach art or how we engage with sensory materials in early childhood. And then each self-paced module is tied to a live session. And that live session is the middle part of what we did today, right? Where I will probably hands-on lab show you how I go through a particular material and show you how I think about it. And then I will have time together for you to have some hands-on practice and get your questions answered live. If you can't attend a live session, those will be recorded and placed alongside the self-paced module, so you don't have to worry about not being able to make it to the live. But I am going to try to match the timing of the live sessions to the schedules of the people who sign up for the course. So when you sign up for the course, you'll receive a survey. And it will ask you what time zone you're in and what are the most convenient times for you to attend a live session. And I will do my best to do the live sessions at a time when the majority of people can attend. That might mean that the live sessions switch day or time each week. That won't mean that they're thrown on you. I will have all of the live session timing planned out by the time that the course opens on January 29th, and you'll get that schedule. So it's not like, the day before, oh no, here's all of a sudden Nicole's throwing a live session at me. We'll give you plenty of time to plan for it. I just want to make sure people can make it there, because I think I like self-paced and I like having access to everything, and I like having the recordings available, because particularly with being on the West Coast of the United States, a lot of workshops are geared towards East Coast timing. And so I find it difficult to, particularly when I'm also teaching. And so just timing wise, I can't always make it. So I like having the option of being able to access a recording later. But I always attend things live when I can, because then I can get my questions answered. I can chat with other people. I can get ideas from other people. And then also each self-paced module comes with a workbook page for you to kind of work through a framework on your own and practice. So you think about it, if you were signing up for a college course, maybe, I would think about it, the self-paced modules are the lecture. The live sessions are your lab, and the workbook is your individual practice to solidify what you're doing and apply what you're learning. You will receive a 6-hour certificate of completion, and you can do with that what you want in terms of whether or not your particular licensing agency will accept it. I can't know that, but I will provide you with that certificate. Like I said, the course is going to officially start January 29th, and then our first live session will start that week. You don't have to start it that day. You can start it whenever you want after that date. That's when everything will be available. You do it on your own time, at your own pace. We will be doing 1 live session per week starting that week. And so you can attend the live sessions without doing the self-paced module. That's fine. Or you can wait and do them on your own time on the recording. It's a really low introductory price of $42 because this is the first time for me to do this course. Which is actually the first time for me to do any extended course. So I'm kind of being selfish in that I want a good number of people to be able to sign up so that I can get feedback, so that I can make changes and updates and, kind of thinking about it as you'll be my beta testers. And then, of course, any changes that I make, any updates, you will have access to that. You can get a refund with a couple of conditions, within 14 days of a course purchase or course start date, because I know whichever is later for you. So if you don't start the course until March, that's fine. 14 days after the day you started it, you can get a refund. But I need for you to have tried. Right? Try at least one of all three methods. Show me that you've done one of the self-paced modules, that you've attended or viewed a recording of an interactive session, that you've attempted to do a workbook page, and then you must not have completed more than 2 modules. That basically means, don't do the entire course and then, tell me it didn't work and you need a refund. So this is the link for you to hopefully capture in some way, but I can also send that out to you in the email when I send out the recording for you to sign up for the course. So I do hope that you will be able to join us. I'm going to leave that up there if you want to copy it down. And then open it up for questions. And like I said, this can be questions about the course or about the fine motor workshop that we just completed today.
Do you have any fun books you could recommend, like Leaf Man?
Oh, wow. There are, what are my favorite? This is a good question. What are my favorite nature books? I think almost anything by Lois Ehlert works. She has one called Snowballs, which is a really good introduction, I think, to making large-scale snowmen or small ones with Play-Doh or clay and a lot of loose parts. Just know that if you do that, it's an opportunity for children. I say that because a few years ago I did that. The children kept saying, when is it going to snow? When is it going to snow? And, Frozen was popular and they really wanted to make snowmen. So I put out with the Play-Doh, little twigs and acorns and little pebbles and some fabric strips, thinking this is great. They can build snowmen. And maybe one child built a snowman. And then I got a lot of hedgehogs and volcanoes and a lot of other interesting things. I don't put in the chat. Anybody here, if you have favorite nature books. I love The Listening Walk, which has nothing to do with fine motor, but is a really good oops, I don't know what just happened there. A really good introduction to paying attention to nature. Lois Ehlert is the author that I would do almost anything. There's a series Over and Under the Snow, Over and Under the Pond. Oh, there's like On Top of the Garden, Under the Dirt, which is all Lynn Messner's books. See if I had an example of that one sitting nearby, but I don't. Who else are my kids' favorite go to. We just did one. Oh, there are two worms, and I'm blanking on the title, unfortunately. Two worms, Wiggle and Waggle. That's what it's called. And I don't know the author. But it's a great entry into, because of the worms that are, they at one point form letters in the soil. So that's fine motor. There's some science into it when talking about how worms interact with the soil and help plants grow. There's a lot of connections to that book. And it's kind of set up like the Frog and Toad books, where they're very short, standalone standalone chapters. Oh, great. Thank you for that.
That looks cute.
Any other questions? And keep adding to the chat if you have more picture book ideas. Great. Well, if there aren't any, oh, do you travel to do I can travel to do presentations at schools. Absolutely. So, if you are interested, I would suggest emailing me, and then we can talk about the presentation and prices. The Night Tree. Oh, I do know that one. That is a really good one. Yes. It's kind of similar to, what is that? Stranger in the Woods, where the children are making a snowman out of edible loose parts as kind of a present to the animals in the forest.
What's that one called?
Stranger in the Woods. I don't know the author of that one either. Sorry. It's the illustrations are all photographs, which is interesting. Hive Minds, way to go. Thank you. This is what I like about doing workshops, because interaction, helps. No one person knows everything or can be the helpful person for somebody else.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Yeah. Hard. Yeah. This is by Carl Sams.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I'm excited to get some of these books. And yeah, thank you for all your ideas too. It's very, very helpful.
Well, thank you for all being here, and I hope that you are all figuring out how to stay warm during our cold snap, and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope to see you at the end of the month at our course. Thank you.